do you mind sharing some of your experience with just Overwatch, or if you have no experience with Overwatch, what other gaming experience do you have? Do you have much coaching experience?
So where I started out was in Rainbow Six Siege. I started coaching that because I was playing casually with friends, and my friend was accepted to a pro team at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and the head of the team liked my playing style so much. He was like, "Would you like to be on the team, or would you like to coach the team?" And
Mm-hmm.
I told him truthfully, I'd prefer to coach, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Perfect." So what we went from there was he's like, I'm recruiting for Overwatch and COD as well, and we got to talking about like what kind of games do you play? I'm like, I mostly play FPS. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really play much else, really. Coaching was mostly in my wheelhouse in Rainbow Six Siege, but
Mm-hmm.
I did do some coaching in Overwatch as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, most
Cool.
of my experience comes from Siege.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, then how much Overwatch experience do you have? Have you played the game a decent bit, or are you relatively new?
I've played it a decent bit, mostly in Overwatch 1. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't play a lot of 2.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you played a bit of Overwatch 1, you're coming back into Overwatch 2. Um, how many, like, approximately how many hours do you have in the game? Did you play for, like, years, or did you, with hundreds of hours, or did you just, kind of dabble with a couple dozen?
I would say original Overwatch it was probably over like a 3 year span. I played it
Okay.
probably a couple hundred hours.
Gotcha. All right, cool. So,
Yeah.
so base game. That's good. So, I won't, we'll probably go into some, fundamentals still, just for sake of being able to coach. But okay, now
Yeah.
I know what we're working with. So then basically, I'll be going over a lot of just like what are the different things that you can be talking about when you're coaching in Overwatch. How does team play work? Because obviously you're going to be working with a team. So how do you coach
Yeah.
team play? How do you like? What are the different things that you should be looking for? How is it that you can help them improve things like that? Basic game fundamentals. Yeah, I'll just be walking you through all of the ins and outs of how my mindset when I'm coaching people and in Overwatch and whatnot. All right, so I'm gonna open. I'm not sure if we're gonna be using this right away, but I'm just gonna open up a stream to in-game, and we'll probably at some point touch on that. Um,
Okay.
so let's talk about some different things. I think last time right away we talked about like team compositions. Are you familiar with the three main team compositions in Overwatch?
Like I said, I've dabbled in it a little, but
Mm-hmm.
I know um, I can't remember the name right now.
Mm-hmm. All good. Maybe it'll ring a bell if I start going over it.
Refresh me real quick. I'm sorry.
Sure, all
I
good.
can't think of the name.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we might as well go into some of the go into some more depths on it even anyways, even if you know some of the basics of what they are. But I just posted a quick diagram real quick to the chat if you want to take a look at it. The
Okay.
three primary team compositions that have existed in Overwatch, basically from the beginning, are Dive, Brawl, and Spam. Other words for Brawl are going to be like Death Ball or Rush. Spam's otherwise known as like Poke, or, I guess that's the main ones, Spam and Poke. And I'm going to walk through what characters make up these compositions, how to know what comp you're on, how these compositions want to play, the rock paper scissors between them, and also just like to start composition. It's really important to know these different compositions just because it has a big impact on how you play the game. It just really dictates, especially in team play, when this will come into play a lot because respecting these compositions is going to be really good in knowing how to be coordinated. Um,
Oh.
so, to start us off, right? Dive, that's going to be your very mobile characters, right? You're probably familiar with that one. That one's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Monkey, Diva, Tracer, Genji, support characters that can keep up with it. So Ana, maybe Mercy, Kiriko, characters like that, right? Um, Brawl, they're going to be characters that are very close ranged characters, such as Reinhardt, Junker Queen, Lucio, Moira, Reaper, Mei, characters like that. And then Spam are very long ranged characters, so they're going to be like Sigma, or it could be there's so many DPS that are Spam, so like snipers or soldier or Ash is a sniper, or you can have like Junkrat and Far and Echo, Hanzo, lots of just really long range characters that pump out a ton of damage, right? Um,
All right.
so those are the three main team compositions. Every team comp that pretty much has existed has been some like variation on one of these. All of the more specific ones. And this is how each of them wants to play. Now that we know what they are, how do they interact with each other? How do they approach the game? Each has their own play styles and objectives. Dive compositions, they typically, because they're very mobile, they start off pretty far away, but they can close the gap and get in very close very quickly. Um, Pacing wise, it kind of depends. Sometimes dive can start out pretty slow and then get faster and faster as they get elims and as they get ults and things like that. Or you can run like a hard dive and just go 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 and try to jump on their back line right away.
Okay.
So it can kind of be one or the other there. Brawl and Spam are pretty much opposites. So where Brawl are close range characters, because they're close ranged, they need to be playing fast, running in and getting on top of people. Because if they play slow and they're just kind of strolling around, then they get shot at from ranges they can't shoot back from, and they'll just kind of slowly lose that fight, or quickly lose that fight, just because they're not doing anything fast enough. So on the other hand, Spam is the exact opposite. Because they're long ranged characters, they want to play far and slow. The slower the fight takes, the more time they have to just kind of pump in damage, pick them apart, and just shoot from the range they prefer. So that's the three different team compositions. Rough rock paper scissors between them is going to be Brawl is good into dive, since dive is likes to jump in and get on top of you and kind of kill squishy characters. Brawl is very tanky, so they can kind of tank the dive. And then once again, Brawl's close range, so if you're diving into them, then that's just the range they prefer anyways. So you're kind of playing into them at that point. Dive is good into Spam though, because Spam likes to play away, but if you can close that gap very quickly and get on top of the squishy characters, because usually Spam is pretty squishy and they're very low HP, you can blow them up and just do a lot of damage very quickly. And then Spam has an advantage against Brawl, because Brawl needs to get on top of Spam, but Spam it's just easier to run away than it is to get on top of somebody. So Spam can kind of just dance away and play the distance. Does all that make sense? Is everything making sense so far? Any questions on any of it?
No, I'm just quiet because I'm writing notes.
Yep,
But
all
yeah, that
good.
all makes sense.
All right, cool. All good. I'm just making sure you're tracking.
Yep.
So then hybrid is just any time you're not on anything in particular. In ranked settings, that's usually like a negative connotation. In team environments, it can kind of differ. It kind of depends. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it's not. You got to be careful with hybrid team compositions though, because if you're running kind of mixed comps, then you might run into problems, right? So think, for
Hmm.
example, let's say you have 2 brawl characters and 3 spam characters. Well, you're kind of on like a hybrid comp. It's kind of like a brawl spam hybrid, right? And at that point, you have two teammates who are trying to play fast and close, and 3 teammates who are trying to play far and slow. So 2 of them will just kind of be running in on their own, and the other 3 are going to be sitting back. So you kind of have disjointment within the team compositions, and then that means that they're just kind of everyone's just going to be doing their own thing, and it just becomes very disorganized, and a team comp that does have a solid objective will probably have the advantage. So that's when you're formulating team compositions. I would encourage you to just think through and try to stick on the same team composition. Now, everybody will have their preferences for some people might be less flexible than others, right? And
Hmm.
I wouldn't force people off of their comfort picks if they're not willing to, if they're just wanting to stick with their 1 or 2 characters. But for people who are willing to be flexible, I try to stick on a composition, because then you get a coherent team objective. um, how do you know what team comp you're on? Well, usually it's just like majority wins. If you have like 5 or 4 characters that are brawl, then you're on a brawl comp. If you have 3 characters on brawl and 2 characters on spam, then like you're mostly brawly and maybe a little bit spam. Something else to keep in mind is that every character isn't always going to be locked into being good at one composition. Some characters are flexible and can be good at multiple compositions. So if you think through like character like Reinhardt's really only good in a brawl, right? He's not good at dive.
Hmm.
He's not good at spam. He's just a brawly guy. But if you think through like another tank, like for example, Ramatra, he is going to be good in both a brawl because he can get in there and punch, but then also he's good in spam because he can sit back and poke pretty easy. So he's going to be good at getting both of the best of both worlds, but he's not divey at all, right? So he's not going to have any of that. Another example, Widowmaker, right? Just spam, right? She can't brawl, she can't dive. She can do okay with a dive, like 'cause she can kind of as the dive dives in, she can kind of still see things and poke, but she's not going to do anything with a brawl. And then spam, she's going to excel in, right? So great in spam, okay in dive, bad in brawl. But then another character, like for example, let's say like I guess like Junkrat, right? Junkrat's gonna be a good in a spam. He's gonna be good in spam, but also good in brawl, and then kind of like okay, maybe more like meh at a dive, right? So different characters will be different, good in different compositions, and you just gotta figure out like what characters work best. So if you have these different characters, you just got to look at what composition seems the most coherent. Typically, tanks have a bigger pull on what comp you're running because they dictate initiation a lot of the time of when you're pushing in, as well as the fact that they're kind of like the 2-in-1 role, right? Since they got rid of the other tank. Supports usually have the least pull because they're usually kind of in the back. They don't dictate initiation, and usually they're all pretty flexible too. Supports are probably the most flexible out of all the roles. So tanks most pull, DPS middle amount of pull, supports least amount of pull. So that's how you kind of tell what comp you're on. Does that all make sense? Any questions on that?
Mm. Makes perfect sense.
Cool. Well, just
Um,
as a quick example, sorry, did you have a question?
oh no, sorry, I'm just writing down.
All good, all good. Oh, poop, I don't have a replay on this account, apparently. I think it's just because a patch just happened. I was gonna really quickly pull up a match, but um, let me exit out here. You don't happen to have any replays available, do you?
I do not,
Okay,
unfortunately, right
all
now.
good. I'm just gonna log on to my main account real quick, and then that way we have a replay to work through. Yeah, we'll just do somebody else's that I've used. Oh, boop. Making me do the authenticator. One moment.
Yeah, no worries.
I don't know why it's making me do that when I've logged on this before. Hmm. All right. So I'll just when we get in game, I'm just gonna do a quick, I guess, quiz on to see if you can guess what composition people are running. Just
Okay.
just so you can get a feel for it. So this is gonna be really handy. Like I said before, with firstly knowing how your team should play, because then you get to watch them and go, okay, well, is the team, if they're on a brawl, are they actually running in and playing close and being fast, or are they just kind of sitting around? If they're on a spam, are they actually playing to how their comp wants to play? You can help them make sure they're picking best characters for different maps. That's another variable to keep in mind. Oh, sorry, my mic cut out there. That's another variable to keep in mind, is that different maps are better for different team compositions. So maps that are good for brawl characters, I guess let's show that really quickly. Maps that are going to be good for brawl characters are going to be very close ranged, close quarters maps, right? So the classic one is going to be like King's Row. That's the classic. So you can see this one. Right? Then there's there's even other ones like a lot of control points will have, at least part of the maps will be good for brawl. Decent bit of control points are like that. Like Lijiang Towers has 2 points that are good for brawl. Busan has 2 points that are good for brawl. Antarctic Peninsula has 2 points that are good for brawl. So a decent bit of those will have brawly points. Spam maps are going to be very long, stretched, and open maps. So, for example, really good examples of this. A lot of times, escort maps are spammy. So Havana is spammy. Circuit Royale is spammy. And then Junkertown is spammy. Those are really good spam maps. So Junkertown, guess it didn't refresh it here. None. Like this map right here. You can see that's going to be a very long, open, spammy map. Usually they like a decent bit of high grounds, but not too high groundy, because if it's too vertical and not enough horizontal, then
Hmm.
that's where dive does really good, because they can jump up and get on top of you super easily. So, for example, a map like Watchpoint Gibraltar is going to be a very good divey map, because you can just it's more vertical than it is horizontal. So dive is going to be able to jump up to those high grounds very, very easily and take and just cover space on those. Does all that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Yep. Um, Out of curiosity, what kind of role? I think I skipped asking that for the other coach. But what kind of role are you being put on when you're coaching these guys? Are you going to be doing like macro coaching, micro coaching, individual one-on-one coaching? Do you kind of assistant coaching? Like, do you kind of know what you're going to be going for?
I'm mostly assisting Coach Patron and
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you'll be kind of assistant coaching, but then that means that you should probably that's still pretty broad in general. So we'll probably cover a
Yeah.
lot of different things then. All right. So let's skip in here. Right. That's also why, since team comps dictate play style, it's also important to keep track of throughout a game when people swap characters. So if you take a look, the different at top left and top right. What team composition would you say Team One is currently running?
That looks like a poke team.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think I would agree. You have Sigma, who's spam, right? Then you have
Mhm.
May, who's brawl, but she can work okay in a spam. She's just not good, not that's not divey. Farah, she's gonna be dive spam, right? So she can spam too.
Mhm.
So that's two spam, one okay spam. You have Lifeweaver, who's going to be Lifeweaver. Hmm, Lifeweaver's a hard one. I'd say he's gonna work okay in a spam, but I'm trying to think. He'd work good in spam with his pedal platforms, but then he's gonna not be as good because he doesn't have anybody to recall. But he
Yeah.
can still use that. So I'd say he's gonna work pretty okay in a spam. Maybe just not the best. He'd probably work better in a dive, and then work okay in a brawl too. So he'd work with it. And then Kiriko, she's divey, but she'd work okay with it. So I'd say the biggest thing pulling them towards spam is the fact that they're on Sigma, who is not a dive character and is okay in a brawl. So maybe you can say they have some brawly elements, but primarily are spam. That all makes sense.
Yes.
Yep. And then what is the team two on?
It looks like a mix of brawl and poke
So
because
good.
Reinhardt on a Genji, and I'm not sure who that is in there.
Sojourn.
Sojourn, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Always forget her name.
Yep, all good. So you're right. They're probably primarily brawly with some spam elements of Sojourn and Mercy mixed in there, right? So they can kind of follow up. Like they'll be sitting back a little bit. It's probably better that you have three brawl and two spam than it is to have two brawl and three spam, because then you can sustain the brawl, right? And then the spam can kind of also help out, right? So they're mostly brawl with a little bit of spam mixed in there, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if it changes by the end of the game at all. Okay, so we have on the left side a few changes. On the right side, yep, a few changes. So team one, what are they on?
It looks like they're on poke now.
Because they changed up. They have a Widowmaker now, right? Which
Yeah,
before they
and they
didn't.
changed their healer into Moira.
Mm-hmm. Which what comp would Moira work with?
I feel like she'd be more poke because she has a lot more long range abilities.
Moira, in fact, is actually primarily a brawl composition. Is better
Oh,
with
okay.
brawl. She the only really long ranged ability she has is her orbs, but they have a pretty long cooldown, and they're not really gonna do like too much in comparison to a lot of other brawly supports. Like if you think like Zenyatta and Baptiste,
Hmm.
they can both just pump and damage from a range. Ilari, long ranged, but Moira, she has a let's see, a 20-meter range on her grasp, so she can't even damage outside of 20 meters. So usually 15 to 30 meters is mid-ranged, and poke is
Okay.
going to be mid to long ranged. So she can't even damage, and that's going to mean that if she can't damage, she doesn't get damage. She also doesn't get ult charge. That's how she recharges her resources as well, her healing resource. So she's definitely a brawl character. She can maybe do like, I'd say okay in a die. Nah, yeah, she's still not great. And then she's like more like meh to okay in a dive and a spam, right? She can maybe do it, but
Hmm.
still best in a brawl. I'd say that we're probably still about what we were before. I'd say maybe you have some more brawly elements than before. So now they're kind of like on a brawly spam hybrid, right? Um,
Yeah.
Sigma great spam, middle brawl. Mei, great brawl, middle spam. Um, the Widowmaker, spam. Lifeweaver, kind of can is flexible. Moira brawly, but then Sigma pulls it towards the spam, so they're kind of like half and half ish, right? So this is
Hmm.
probably like the comp that you don't really want if you, in all honesty, right? It's not
Yeah.
really the best comp to be running with, just because it's kind of pulling in different directions. All right. What is the Team 2 on?
It looks like a mix of spam and dive, almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. Yep, I agree with that one. They're pretty much like all on dive besides Orisa and Alari, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Orisa's gonna be like brawly spam, and then Alari is. Oh, sorry, I'm back. So then Alari is gonna be pretty also like brawly spam. So so I agree. And then the other three are dive characters, so they're kind of mixed
Yeah.
up too. Also, once again, this works okay because divey characters like these flankers a lot of times are a bit more self-sufficient, so they can kind of all go and do their own things a lot of the time. So not as divisive in pulling each other apart because they can just play deathmatchy and everyone does their own thing.
Yeah.
All right. And then quick quiz. What kind of map is this map? What compositions would fare the best on this map?
I would say either full brawl or spam.
Yep.
Because I know there's some long points that
Mm-hmm.
you can snipe from, and some choke points you can get real brawl into.
Yep. It probably keeping in mind that sometimes it changes per part of the map, and that's why you can swap up team comps sometimes on different parts
Hmm.
of the map, right? So this first point, I'd say, is pretty equally brawly spam. Like choke point right here is pretty brawly because it's close quarters. But then once you get past that, then this is all wide open spam, right? Second
Hmm.
point is pretty much all spam. It's very wide open, but Brawl can probably do okay. And then last point, spam, spam, spam. But then Brawl is going to be doing good in this, probably this last point is Brawl. So overall summary, spam is probably best on this map. Brawl is probably spam is great. Brawl's pretty good, and then dive is probably just like okay here. Not
Yeah.
super great. All right, cool. Let's get to some other stuff then. So that was your in-depth on team comms. So let's see. Um, let's talk about positioning. I think we went over a lot of that in depth last time. So let's go over general positioning because this is going to apply to like everybody and your whole team, right? If I'm standing right here, the enemy team is
Hmm.
standing over there. They're all looking at you and shooting at you, right? Let's say we're trying to run away and get away from damage. Well, it's going to take you 1, 2, 3 seconds to get behind cover. Now from here, can't shoot through solid objects, so we're all fine and dandy, but in that time it took you to walk here, you ended up dying, just because you're way too far out in the open. Um, but from cover, you can do a lot of the same stuff, except for you just have cover, so you're not going to die, and it takes you half a second to duck behind cover, 6 times faster than what it just took us over there. So, therefore, good positioning is the usage of cover, and bad positioning is the absence of cover. The further away we stray from it, the worse off you're going to be. And the great thing in Overwatch is there's cover all over the place. You have slopes like so, random pillars that you can play off of, right, when you're dodging damage in between shots. Corners, same thing, kind of defend off the corner, right? Random objects like the payload sitting around, pillar, corner, doorway, corner, doorway, right? All over the place. It's great. And then also high grounds, very great positioning. They all act as natural cover for the most part, as long as you're using it properly. It can act as natural cover. Notice how we can't back up here, but we can back up here, and they can't see you anymore, right?
Yeah.
Then on top of that, 2/3 of the characters in the game can't get to you without using the stairs, which gives you additional survivability. The third that can, they need to use abilities, which is additional survivability because you can just run away afterwards. On top of that, you have a ton of visibility. We can see here and here, here, but when you're on the low ground, well, then you can't really see any of the high ground, or there, or there, or there, right? So you just lose out on visibility as well. And because high ground is so great, that's going to mean that it's great for your team and their team, right? So that means that by taking high ground for your team and securing it, you give it advantage to your whole team, as well as potentially ripping it away and contesting it from the enemy team. So a lot of times high ground is really great to take control of, as long as it's in the fight. If it's nowhere near the fight, like if the point's over there and we're like up on this high ground, then it's not going to do nothing for you, right? But
Yeah.
if it's relevant high ground, it's going to be good for you. Does all that make sense? Any questions so far?
No, no.
Cool. Let's talk choke points and no man's land. So this will apply to your whole team, but primarily your tank, because your tank is the one who is kind of leading where your team stands a lot of the time. Choke points, are you familiar with that term? It's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just points on the map where you can contest or lock it down, depending.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very easy way to think of it is like it's a funnel, right? It kind of just
Mhm.
squishes the enemy team all into this little tiny area, and then if your team's pumping in damage, it's basically not gonna miss, right? If you're in a wide open area, you're gonna miss your shots. In a tiny little area, pretty much everything's landing, so they're gonna be taking a lot of extra damage. So it's usually bad positioning to be standing in. So if we're defending it, we let's say they have to push through to get the point over there, right? So they have to push through here. If we're defending them and we're holding here, right? There's a problem, because to push through and get to point and cap, do they have to do that to kill you and win the fight?
No.
No, because we're positioning here, which means they can just kind of fight you here and not even have to push through. They can push through after they kill you, right?
Yeah.
So there's no incentive for them to need to push through it. So that means they don't go in the bad positioning, and then in fact you kind of put yourself in the bad positioning because you and your teammates have to walk through it to get away. So you don't want to hold in front of it, you don't want to hold in the middle of it, you want to hold at the back end of it, so that they do have to walk through it to get to you guys, and you can just try to hold them in there as long as you possibly can, and then that gives your team the advantage and them the disadvantage. Make sense?
Hmm.
Cool. Now, No Man's Land is a lot of the same stuff. It's just a little bit different. No Man's Land is any long stretch of space where there's not a lot of cover, right? So this right here, if we're trying to run through this, not a lot of cover to get through. So think of, like we were just saying, those very wide open spammy, spam maps, right? Those are going to have a lot of no man's lands, and brawly maps are going to have a lot of choke points, right? Those are going to be kind of what makes those up. But there's still going to be both of those on all sorts of different maps, right? So when same concept, if we're defending, if we defend up here, then they don't need to push through us to get the point. And they can just kill us and then go point.
Yeah.
And then we also put ourselves in the bad positioning. So we don't want to hold front, we don't want to hold middle, we want to hold the end so that they do have to push through to us. We can spam them the whole time they're approaching, and then once they get close, then we can engage on them, right?
Hmm.
Then when you're attacking it, you're going to want to, because it's bad positioning, you want to get through it as quickly as possible and using as much cover as possible. So you don't want to take this wide open angle, hug the inside, and just run through it, and then try to explode out of it if you're able to, right? No man's land, same thing. Instead of just running straight through, I'm going to go from cover to cover over here, and then from cover to cover over here, do a little recharge if we need to, and then we're exploding and running in, right? So as quick as possible and as much cover as possible. Right? Makes sense? Any questions?
No.
Cool. Let's talk about yeah, we're gonna cover a lot of fundamentals here because we'll get into, I think, next session a lot more of communication and team play elements, but I think it's good to go over fundamentals of gameplay before we get to those. So we kind of have a basic structure to work with. Let's talk about, basics of awareness. It's probably the same in a lot of different games, but obviously awareness is just paying attention to your surroundings. So when it comes to your players, if you notice anybody's not paying attention to their surroundings, make sure they're pressing tab. It shows you team comps. Did they swap anything? Did we swap anything? What ults do we have? They should be pressing that, at least once in between fights at the very minimum. They need to watch their HUD. They need to check their surroundings, check where's your team at, where's their team at. A big one in kill feed is how do you tell whether or not you've won a fight or lost a fight, right? That's going to be important for your whole team to know, right? Because that'll dictate a lot of things. And you tell this pretty easily. You tell this primarily through kill feed, right? When you're watching kill feed, the top right corner of your screen, if you are up or down 1 to 2 people, that is an advantage or a disadvantage, in which case you play more aggressive with advantages, you play more passive with disadvantages. 2 to 3 is a won fight or a lost fight, right? If you've won the fight or lost the fight and you don't want to use any ults, because then it just gets wasted, and then you get extra aggressive for one fight. For a lost fight, you get out if you can, and if you can't, you let them kill you. That way your team isn't staggering. Staggering is another thing that you want to watch out for with your team that they're not doing, because staggering, are you familiar with the term?
Yes, staggering is when the respawn's coming up.
Yep, so primarily when they're just out of sync, right? So if somebody's dying late, so let's say all of your team dies, and then one person dies like 10 seconds later. That's not going to be good for them, because then your team has the choice either to wait, in which case they've just wasted time, or push without them, in which case they're at a disadvantage and are more likely to lose the fight, right? And then you also have the chance to start stagger trains, where one person pushes in and dies, and then the next person pushes in and dies, and then 2 people pushes in and dies, and it just wastes so much time and loses you a ton of fights. So the watching and communicating and watching for when fights are won and lost, that helps prevent staggering, because people will know, get out if you can, die if you can't. Now, once again, you're a coach, so let's go into some of the depths. Let's go over some of the more in-depth stuff here. I said 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3. Well, 2 is the middleman there, right? 2, it can kind of go, it could be a one fight, and it just an advantage or disadvantage, right? It can go either direction. So how do you tell? Well, there's a lot of other things that dictate advantages and disadvantages in Overwatch. It's not just kills, right? Being up people, down people. There's also which team has more health, which team has better positioning, closer spawns, has and is using more abilities, more ultimates, things like that, right? All those things will be advantages and disadvantages. So, for example, let's say your team is down 2 people. It's a 5v3. But the enemy team is all 1 HP. Well, that's probably, still maybe winnable, right? Because you have a heavy enough advantage that's pulling you back to make it winnable. But if you're down 2 players and have no additional significant advantage, then at that point it's probably a lost fight, right? Because you're just down too many people to try to swing it back around.
Yeah.
That all makes sense? Any questions on that?
No.
Cool. Let's see. Next, let's talk ult usages. So you have ult usage is going to be different per character, obviously, but you also have general ult usage across like what's going to be good ways to use ultimates. Generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, the best timing to use ultimates is going to be the start of fights. Mid fights are okay. Late fights are situational. And then in between fights is very rare. Do you want to use in between fights? Maybe just like if it's final fight or something like that. Or if you have a chance to make like a really big play. But the reason why is because generally speaking, ults that are used first are better than ults that are used second. So if I come into a fight and I land a big fat shatter on Reinhardt, right, or even even 1 or 2 people, and I get value out of my ult, and I do it first, and let's say I get a kill out of it, well, now they're at a disadvantage. So let's say they use shatter second and they get the exact same amount of people shattered. Well, they have less teammates to follow up and capitalize on it, right? Because they have less people to shoot at the people who are down, which means they'll probably get less value out of it. Think like a Baptiste window, right? Baptiste to ult second, if they're down a player, they might have less people to shoot through their window, right? Or you could just flat up win the fight before they get a chance to use ultimates. So, generally, engaging first will give you the general advantage, not in any and all situations, but generally speaking, initiating first with ultimates will usually give an advantage in comparison. But if you play your cards right, you can mitigate that and flip it around anyways. So it kind of just depends. And do keep in mind that this doesn't apply to every ultimate. Some ultimates are reactionary, like Lucio Beat and Zenyatta ultimate are defensive ultimates. They want to be used kind of as a result of other things going on. Right? All that makes sense? Any questions?
No.
Cool. We'll go over more ult economy and coordination in the next session, where we'll talk about how do you coordinate all of that with your team. Ability usage is hard because it varies a lot between different characters, right? You have a lot of variety with abilities. General principle is that you don't want to see somebody never using an ability. That's bad. Usually you want quantity with abilities. Some abilities are reactionary, so it kind of depends a little bit, right? Like, for example, like Baptiste Lamp, right? He's throwing Lamp as a defense for Immortality Field when people need it. So if you never see him using it at all in a game, well, then that's a problem, right? But if he doesn't use it for 40 seconds, well, that could just be because the opportunity hasn't come up, right? And he needs to wait on it. So some abilities you're just gonna like toss them out again and again, like Ash Dynamite. No reason not to just like throw it out any chance you get. just kind of use it off cooldown. Every time it comes back up, it's just back out there. But then Coach Gun, you're gonna use that whenever you need to like get the high grounds, right? So it's gonna be a little bit more selective, right, when you're using it. So it kind of depends
Yeah.
on the ability, but some abilities, quantity is really important, and then also quality is really important. You want to make sure that like if you're throwing out the dynamite, you can't just miss every single dynamite. You gotta actually make sure they're landing some of the time, right? So those are
Hmm.
going to be quantity and quality, and then some abilities are going to be reactionary or specific scenarios. Just want to make sure they aren't wasting them as well. Mechanics. So you're coming from Rainbow Six Siege. I would
Yes.
imagine is like crosshair placement a big thing in Rainbow Six Siege.
Yes.
Decently
That's a
big.
very big
Yeah,
thing.
very big thing.
Yeah.
I imagine so, right? It's like that as well in like Valorant and CS:GO in games like that, right? Because it's a very big percentage of the game. In Overwatch, what I want you to get in Overwatch, it's still present. So don't like sometimes like people will like come from the other games to this game and then they're overwhelmed with all the other parts of the game that they kind of like forget about it. So do note that it's still something that exists within the game. It's just a smaller portion of the game, right? So
Yeah.
if in Rainbow Six Siege, crosshair placement is, and I'm just throwing out a random number, if it's like 40% of the pie, right? It's a much bigger slice of gameplay. In Overwatch, it's still there, but maybe it's more like 10-15% of the pie, right? It's just a little bit
Yeah.
less crucial, but it's still there and present. Part of that is going to be that some characters need it and some characters don't. Any character that can land headshots want to be aiming head level because you're getting like 2 times damage, right? But there's going to be a lot of characters that don't land headshots. Reinhardt, Winston, Ana, Moira, Mercy, right? Junkrat, Pharah. There's a lot of characters that don't land headshots, so on them, you can have pre-aiming, right? So like aiming where you know people are going to be and lining up your shot before you even turn that corner, but headshots aren't essential to them. So you have some elements of crosshair placement still in there, but not the like fundamental of head level aiming.
Yeah.
Um, right? Yeah, that makes sense too.
Hmm.
Cool. We have about like 6 minutes left to like talk about things, and then we can like set up our next session. Do you have so far any questions about anything? Any questions for me about gameplay or anything else?
No, mostly because I have played
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch. It's just mostly getting used to the comps.
Mm-hmm.
That's like my biggest thing was getting used to comps.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha, gotcha. Yep.
Because you always have somebody who's like, "Well, I'm gonna play this character because I like this character, not because it's
Mm-hmm.
helpful, because I like
Exactly.
it." So
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep, and they just might be really good at that character, right? And they're not great at
yeah,
others. So that's something you'll have to kind of deal with your team is, maybe you might have a person or two who are like that, who like really can only play one or two characters. And as the coach, you kind of have um, to be able to know, do I push on that or do I let them stay, right? It
yeah,
might depend on the person. Are they going to be stubborn about it or are they willing to try to learn, right? If they're stubborn about it and they're like, sorry, I just want to stick with my character, or they try and they're just horrible at everything else, then maybe you let them and you just play around, especially if it's a flexible character, because some characters are more flexible than others, right? Like, Anna's gonna work Anna, Mercy are gonna work with a decent bit of team comps. Um, Echo's gonna work with a decent bit of team comps. Rissa is gonna work with a decent bit of team comps, right? So if they're flexible characters, maybe they can get away with it. If they're like,
yeah,
one trick ponies on like, character that only works on one team composition, like Reinhardt, then it becomes a little bit more like you might have to work on that, right? So it kind of
yeah,
just it's nuance. You kind of have to work with it a little bit and figure out it might depend on each individual person. All right. Let's see if there's anything else short that we can cover. In the meanwhile, talked about abilities, ults, awareness, mechanics generally.
Positioning.
Watch ranging. So ranging on different characters. Your general 3 main ranges are close range, mid range, long range. Close range is going to be 0 to 15 meters. As most close range characters lose viability past that range, right? So once again,
Okay.
brawly characters are generally speaking going to want to stick within this, right? Which, different brawl characters are going to be different. Like Reinhardt has like a range of like 5 meters on a swing, or 4 meters on a swing. But then other brawly characters like, Reaper might have a tad bit more range, right? So it kind of depends, but approximately 0 to 15. Mid-range is going to be 15 to 30. Most spam characters are mid-ranged characters, and then long range is going to be 30 plus, right?
Okay.
Some characters can do 30 plus, like Widowmaker can do 30 plus. Ashe can do, she might prefer more like 20 to 35, right? The problem is that once you get past, and this is just preferences, sometimes if you get like the high ground, it can be worth it, right? Like if we have the high ground tier and this is superior positioning, it might be worth it because they have to, especially if you're on like defense, just let them come to you. But if you're attacking, then we kind of can't just like, you might not want to sit back here if it's in ineffective range. The problem is that on different characters, the further away you go on hit scan characters, like Soldier, right? You're going to struggle with different things, such as the fact that you have fall off damage. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots to kill. We go back a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 shots to kill, right? So you're taking more shots to kill. It's a smaller target, so bigger targets easier to hit than smaller targets. So you're also missing more shots. So missing more shots, hitting less headshots, that gives them more time to heal. Also, another problem is going to be projectiles. So like your Helix rocket on Soldier, but then also projectile characters. At ranges, projectiles have a travel time, so they're inherently difficult to land at ranges because by the time it gets there, they might have already moved out of the way, right? Which means you have to aim it ahead. You have to lead the shot, whether they're doing it on purpose or an accident. So therefore, most characters between those two, hit scan and projectile, are going to prefer that mid-ranged, if they're mid-range characters, and then they can play long range. Just kind of depends on the situation, right? All that makes
Okay.
sense?
Yes, it does.
Yep. Cool. All right. Let's do a little bit of wrap up here. I think that's. We don't really have to do like too much of a wrap up. I mean, like we talked about abilities, quantity, quality, ult usage, start a fight, and not using them in won or lost fights, and things like that. Using first, general advantage, mechanics, crosshair placement. We'll talk about target priority another time. That'll be good to cover. I forgot about that one. Positioning.
Okay.
We talked about ranges, close, medium, long. We talked about making sure that you're using cover, taking high grounds. Talked about awareness, pay attention to kill feed, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, advantages, disadvantages, things like that. And then team comps, you have the diagram for. Any
Yes.
final questions?
Not that I can think of now.
All right. Would you like to schedule your next session as 1 hour or 2 hours? Because
Probably 1 hour.
1 hour. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm gonna get you your